Sean Hannity finally tells his secret. There's something special about watching a man who's known for talking about serious topics and tough debates suddenly share something very personal. Sean Hannity, one of America's most well-known voices on conservative TV, did exactly that not long ago. At 63 years old, after many years of talking about politics, being on TV at night, and doing big interviews, Hannity opened up to talk about something much more about being human than about rules or power. Love. His emotional words about the woman he calls the love of my life didn't just shock his fans. It showed a softer side of a man they thought they already knew. But did they really? I was washing dishes at 12, cooking at 13, clearing tables, serving food, working behind a bar for many years. Then I was a painting worker. I put up wallpaper. I built house frames. I was doing building work. I listened to talk radio all day, and one day I'm in Santa Barbara, California, and I find out that the local college has Sean Patrick Hannity was born in Queens, New York in 1961. He was the youngest of 4 kids in a tight Irish-American family. His dad, Hugh, worked as a court worker, while his mom, Lillian, worked at a county jail. It wasn't a fancy life, but it was one based on rules and community. People who knew him as a kid say Sean was stubborn, the kind of kid who keeps going no matter what, which either makes parents frustrated or leads to doing great things later. Growing up in Franklin Square, Long Island, he was just another kid from the neighborhood, working small jobs, cutting grass, and messing around with anything he could find. But it was the sound of radio that first grabbed his attention. Late at night, when most kids were sleeping, Hannity would listen to talk radio. He was amazed by how voices coming through a speaker could get the whole country talking. By his early 20s, Hannity knew he didn't want a normal job. He tried different work, building things, painting, even working behind a bar. But his heart kept coming back to the idea of having a microphone and people listening. His first real chance came when he got a volunteer job at a college radio station in California. It was small, rough around the edges, and didn't pay. But to Sean, it was everything. From that tiny California station, Hannity moved to bigger places, hosting shows in Alabama and Georgia. His never-give-up attitude got noticed by people who saw he could do more than just radio. The timing was perfect. America was entering a time when political talk shows were becoming really important. And Hannity's bold way of doing things was exactly what TV networks wanted. By 1996, his life changed really fast. Fox News, which was a new network trying to grow, picked him to host a new show with a liberal person named Alan Colmes. The show Hannity and Colmes became a huge hit right away. People loved watching the arguments, 2 different viewpoints clashing every night, and Hannity loved it. He didn't just argue, he made sure people heard him. Years later, when the Sean Hannity Show started as his own program, his voice became one of the most known in America. He talked with presidents, criticized government choices, and sometimes caused arguments. But through everything, one thing stayed the same: his energy. Away from the camera, though, Hannity wasn't as loud. Friends and people who worked with him often say he was surprisingly quiet when not on TV. Someone who cares about loyalty, keeping things private, and his beliefs. The person that America saw every night was the TV host. But the man, when the show was over, thought deeply about things. He'd often talk about his beliefs, his family, and the simple things he still missed from when he was young: Sunday meals, his parents' voices, and the kind of truth that only comes from simple beginnings. To many who knew him, it was clear that while Sean Hannity might do well in crazy situations at work, what he really wanted was peace in his personal life. And that's where his story takes a surprise turn. I really believed that by myself, I could do nothing. I believe every single thing we have in this world is a gift from God. Before the fame, before Fox News, Sean Hannity was just a young radio guy trying to make it. And it was during those early years that he met the woman who would become a big part of his life story, Jill Rodas. Jill was a reporter working at a local newspaper in Huntsville, Alabama. When she first heard Hannity's voice on the radio, he would call her asking for story ideas, and soon those work calls turned into personal ones. They were both young, driven, and wanted to succeed. There was a connection, one that quickly grew into something more. In 1993, they got married. It wasn't a fancy wedding. It was simple, full of feeling, and filled with the hope of two people ready to face the world together. Hannity often said Jill was what kept him steady, the calm when things got crazy. As his career grew, so did their family. They had their first child, a son named Patrick, in 1998. And 3 years later, their daughter, Mary Kelly, was born. People who knew Hannity during those years often saw a different side of him. The dad who came to tennis games, the husband who made sure his family stayed close no matter how busy he was. But being famous always has a price. The long hours, the constant traveling, and people always watching began to wear them down as Hannity's career got bigger. His marriage quietly started to have problems. He never talked about it publicly. He never does. But people close to the couple say that years of living with everyone watching slowly built an invisible barrier between them. By 2019, after more than 20 years together, Sean and Jill decided to separate. The divorce was finished quietly without the drama or gossip that usually happens with famous people's breakups. They didn't make mean statements, no tell-all interviews, just two people who had shared a life deciding to go different ways. But if you look carefully, that silence said a lot. It showed respect, not just for each other but for their kids. Even after the split, Hannity and Rhodes kept raising their children together really well. Their kids stayed their most important thing, and friends say Hannity stayed very involved in their lives. For Patrick, his father was there constantly, especially during his tennis career at Wake Forest University. And for Mary, Hannity was the supportive dad who always made time for her sports and school activities. Privately, though, that time was hard for Sean. He was a man used to being in control of conversations, of stories, of what people thought. But love isn't something you can control, and losing someone can't be argued away. People who worked with him noticed a small change during that time. The man who once filled every quiet moment with confidence began speaking a little slower, thinking a little harder. He started spending more time thinking, focusing on his faith and the quiet parts of his personal life. Friends say he became more private than ever, not hiding away but being careful. He stopped talking about relationships at all, avoiding even light questions about dating on his show. To many, it seemed like Sean Hannity had decided that love just wasn't for him anymore. But behind that guarded outside, something else was happening. A slow, quiet discovery of what love could be like the second time around. He had gone through the ups and downs of fame, the highs of success, and the pain of heartbreak. He had built a career that needed all of his attention and had learned that not everything in life can be planned like a TV schedule. So when years later he talked about finding the love of his life at 63, it meant something different. No, Sean Hannity is a conservative. There's no pretending here. I'm not Ted C. Pell. I am a person. It's branded this is a conservative show. I really believe that by myself, I could do nothing. I believe every single thing we have in this world is a gift. After his marriage ended, Sean Hannity didn't make any big announcements or public statements. He simply kept doing what he had always done, showing up. Every night, millions watched him give sharp political talk and strong opinions. But when the camera was off, his world had gone quiet. People who knew him best say that he started caring more about moments than big achievements. He got back in touch with old friends, gave time to his children's activities, and even started hobbies that had nothing to do with politics or television. For a man whose life was all about constant deadlines, that change was huge. But make no mistake, Hannity's career never slowed down. His show kept winning, ranking among the most listened-to programs in America. His nightly television show stayed a ratings winner. But there was something about him that seemed different. The strong tone was still there, But underneath it was a man learning balance. He once mentioned casually that he'd learned how important it was to be thankful, the quiet appreciation for the things that really matter: health, faith, family, and peace. He no longer seemed interested in trying to get approval. For someone who had spent decades in the chaos of American media, that understanding was huge. In those quiet years, Hannity built a routine that focused on staying consistent. Early mornings, exercise, time in prayer, and then straight into work. People who worked with him said he became almost like a monk in his discipline. He didn't date publicly, didn't go to big parties, didn't feed the gossip. He protected his privacy strongly, but underneath that disciplined outside, there was still a longing. Not necessarily for romance, but for friendship. The kind that makes you feel understood when the cameras are off. After all, no matter how successful, no one can avoid feeling lonely. And for Hannity, who had built walls around his private life, letting someone back in wasn't going to be easy. What he didn't know was that the next part of his story was already waiting in the same building. Someone who had walked her own road of love, loss, and strength. You ended up getting a divorce, but your faith kept you very strong through it. Yeah, that was a really hard time in my life, but we get along and we, raise our kids together very well. My name is Aninsley Hehart, and I have worked at Fox News for 14 years. Anley Hart wasn't just another TV person. She was someone who had made her own name in the tough world of broadcast news. From South Carolina, Aninsley brought a sense of grace and happiness to her work, quickly moving up to become one of Fox's most loved morning hosts. Behind that bright smile and calm way of acting, though, was a woman who had gone through her share of heartbreak. She had been through 2 marriages that didn't work out, and was raising her young daughter, Hayden, as a single mom. Her faith had become her guide, something that kept her steady through all of life's rough times. In many ways, Sean and Aninsley's lives were similar. Both were experienced people at the same network. Both had dealt with public watching, and both were learning what it meant to rebuild their personal lives after loss. The connection between them started quietly, based on friendship. They had known each other at work for years, seeing each other in the Fox studios. But somewhere along the way, something changed. Conversations that once were about work began to feel more personal. Hensley liked Sean's discipline, his care for his children, and his faith. Sean liked her strength, her warmth, and her never-ending happiness. There was mutual respect. It wasn't long before people who worked with them began to notice. They often traveled in the same groups, sometimes showing up at events together. But even as whispers began to spread, both Hannity and Hehart stayed quiet. They never said yes or no to anything, choosing to keep their relationship away from the spotlight. For Sean, that was on purpose. After living through people watching his public marriage, he wasn't ready to invite the world into his heart again. But people close to him noticed how different he seemed when Ansley was around. He laughed more. He was lighter. She brought out a gentleness that rarely showed on screen. Their shared values became what their bond was built on: faith, family, and the belief that everything in life happens in its own time. They began going to church together, often sitting quietly in the back, blending in with everyone else. It wasn't flashy romance, no fancy events, no magazine covers, but it was real. They built a connection based on understanding rather than show. When Aninsley began hosting her Bible study segments, Sean became one of her most supportive co-workers. He'd praise her thoughts on air and tell viewers to watch. Privately, he'd tell friends how much he liked her way of thinking, how she managed to stay kind in a world that rewards fighting. What brought them together wasn't opposites attracting, but similarities lining up. They were both public people with private hearts, both looking for something real in a business built on appearances. Their relationship, though quiet, began to turn into something deeper. And while neither of them felt they needed to label it publicly, everyone who saw them together could sense it. For Hannity, who had spent years protecting his emotions, this connection was healing. For Ansley, It was a reminder that even after heartbreak, love has a way of finding you when you least expect it. Then came the moment that changed everything. The confession that would make headlines and remind everyone watching that even the most guarded hearts can still find courage in love. Ensley He Hart. You were with us at the Congress. First of all, congratulations on the book. Thank you so much.